There are 3 steps to solving when you're multiplying radicals. The first step is you're going to multiply the number on the outside of the radical. The second step, you're going to multiply the number under the radical. And then the third step, you're going to simplify. So if we look at our first example, we have the square root of 3 times the square root of 15. So what you're going to do is you're going to take 3 times the square root of 15, which ends up being the square root of 45. And then when you're multiplying, you want to see if you can simplify. So I have the square root of 45, and I know that I can take a greatest perfect square value out, which is going to be 9. So I have 9 times the square root of 5. And then I'm going to simplify, so it would be 3 times the square root of 5. Our second example, which is going to be 12 times the square root of 12. When I do that, I do 12 times 12, which would be the square root of 144. I take the square root of 144, which is 12. So my final answer is going to be 12. Now, if you notice, if you multiply by the square root of a number times the square root of that same number, you always just get rid of the square root and keep that number that's underneath the radical. Now I have example 3. I have 9 times the square root of 10 multiplied by 8 times the square root of 5. So like the first step, we're going to multiply the numbers on the outside. So we're going to do 72 times the square root of 10 times 5, which is going to be the square root of 50. From here, I'm going to see, can I simplify the radical? And I can, because I know that 50, I can take out a perfect square value of 25. So I'm going to do 72 times the square root of 25 times the square root of 2. The square root of 25 is 5, so I have 72 times 5 times the square root of 2, which 72 times 5 is going to be 360 times the square root of 2. Now with this next one, this is saying 3 times the square root of 2 squared. This squared is basically saying that this is 3 times the square root of 2 times 3 times the square root of 2. So that squared means it's being multiplied twice. So I have 3 times 3, which gives me 9. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4. So I have 9 times the square root of 4, which the square root of 4 is 2. So I have 9 times 2, which is going to give me 18. So that would be my answer. For example 5, I now have a radical outside of this parenthesis. Just like a number that's outside of the parenthesis, I'm going to distribute. So I have the square root of 6 times the square root of 3, and the square root of 6 times the square root of 2. So the square root of 6 times the square root of 3 is going to be the square root of 18, plus, so I'm going to keep that plus sign, and this is positive and positive, so it's going to be a plus sign. So 6 times 2 is the square root of 12. Well, I'm not finished yet because now I have to find the greatest perfect square values and see if I can simplify. I can simplify 18, so I have the square root of 9 times the square root of 2 plus the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. So that's for 12. I then am going to simplify, so I have 3 square root 2 plus 2 square root 3. I have to look to see if I can combine like radicals, and I can't, so this is going to be my answer. This last one, I'm going to move this over. I have example, so now you see a radical minus a radical times a radical minus a radical. Now, this kind of looks like in polynomials where we had 2 binomials and we multiplied. So we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to use FOIL. So you're going to do first, so your first terms. So 2 times 3 is going to give me 6, And then 6 times 7 is going to be the square root of 42. Then I'm going to do 2 times the square root of 11. And now it's a negative, so it's going to be a negative 2 times the square root of 66. Then negative 2 times the square root of 5 times 3 times the square root of 7, which is going to be negative 6 square root 35. Then my last one, I'm going to do my last term. So I have a negative times a negative gives me a positive, and then it would be 55. So I have to now see if I can simplify 42, and I'm going to figure out if I can divide by any of the perfect square values. So I'm trying that now, and it looks like I cannot simplify that, so I can just leave that. Now let's see 66. So I'm going to do 66 divided by 4, perfect square value. I'm going to try 9. I'm going to try 16. And none of those work. So this can be simple. That's left. I know that 35, I know the factors are 1 and 35, 7 and 5, so I cannot simplify that, so I can leave that. And then 55, I'm not going to be able to simplify, so this would actually be my final answer.